Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who have experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, Heidi. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Heidi Crockett. Heidi, welcome.
Thanks, Guy.
Heidi is a licensed psychotherapist, interpersonal neurobiology professor, and clinical supervisor specializing in trauma and the relational nature of the brain. She has certifications in somatic experiencing for trauma treatment and from the American Association of Educators, Counselors, and Therapists for sexual health expertise. All right, Heidi, before we go in here, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
So I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was raised by my grandparents there, and I reside in Tampa, Florida.
Okay. All right. So, interesting background. You're in it. You're teaching. You're a professor. How did this start for you?
So I would say my beginnings was back pain in college. That was my beginnings. So I got a degree in liberal arts school, and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I had a back issue. And so what ended up happening was I went to massage therapy school. I think school was too much thinking for me, and I wanted to get more in the body. Yeah, so that was where it started. It started with becoming a massage therapist.
So what was your back thing?
So it was congenital.
Because I have a back thing.
Oh, yeah. You're in the camp. I would say you're in the camp. I'm actually using a standing chair called Lean Right, which is really awesome. Side comment. Yeah.
So what was your back thing?
So it was congenital. It was a rare condition. I had a rare version of a rare condition that didn't get diagnosed for 17 years. Yeah. So I have it's like my little buddy, other people have like a baby, like my back is like my baby.
Is it like structural?
Yeah. What happens is where the lumbar spine meets the sacrum, the transitional vertebrae is a little different.
Wow. Okay. So this back thing kind of moved you into massage school?
Yeah, I know. It was kind of ironic when I think back. I was like, I don't really know what I was thinking at the time. But I was in my early 20s, and I had the problem for 2 years, and then I was able to kind of heal it at the time. And then I didn't know back then, but it was progressive. So then it reappeared about 10 years later. So it's been something that's been with me, and has caused me to, think about healing and health. So I would say my beginnings as a therapist were more body oriented. And then I became a psychotherapist. Yeah. And then I got training in body oriented psychotherapy because of my background.
So talk about the transition or the evolution from or into psychotherapy. What was that inspiration?
So what happened was I got a certification as a health coach, and I started doing health coaching with people. And I was like, oh, I like this. And then I decided to go back to get my master's degree, like in my 30s.
Okay. Why?
I think I was doing body work on people, and I was giving people like a satisfying experience in that hour. But I wanted to do something like deeper and longer lasting. That I felt like and it's not to say massage therapists are amazing. So, and the work they do is really incredible and can be life changing. Yeah. But yeah, when you work with the mind and you get people to understand something, right, then they can have a different relationship with reality for the rest of their life, potentially.
So you go into psychotherapy, you become a therapist. How do things evolve such that because you kind of specialize in what, brain? Talk to us about how that specialization and interest came about.
So I learned about interpersonal neurobiology in grad school, and I was hooked the minute I heard about it because it integrated the body and the mind, but in a way that was backed by science. So I've been interested in it since I learned about it, like in 2010, and I started teaching about it. I've been teaching for about 10 years because I was so passionate about it. So that was kind of the evolution.
Okay. Usually, it's funny. It's you just like skipping over these amazing things. So it's interesting to hear you say like school or college was like too much thinking. And yet here you are specializing in neurobiology. I mean, obviously you're a thinker, but what about neurobiology got you? What about it?
I felt like it had clear explanations for the body. And even like I have training in somatic experiencing, and they'll talk about being undercoupled or overcoupled, or what I liked about interpersonal neurobiology is everything had a definition in it, like the definition of the mind, the definition of attachment. So I felt like it was tangible and touchable, like the body.
So define for our listeners interpersonal neurobiology.
Right. So it's a framework that was created by Dan Siegel, and it looks at, if you think of a triangle, which is like the mind and the brain and relationships, like a triangle, like which is a steering wheel going down a river. It looks at the intersection of those three and how once you come to understand the neuroscience, those things are super interrelated. So it's a framework where you're exploring the mind and the brain and relationships. So just to be clear, so it's not confusing, relationships are in the outside world and the brain is in the inside world. And the mind is the thing that links the two that's more abstract.
Wow. Okay. So you start studying this. How did you get your education in this specifically?
Yeah, I would say I've just been taking workshops, studying it ever since reading every book. I have the Developing Mind. I have the Matter with Things right here to show you. So, and because of my back injury, and my inability, my world got small because of my back pain. There's actually a period of time when I couldn't work or do much. So it afforded me the opportunity to do a lot of studying and reading. So I would say it's been mostly personal and then workshops.
Mm-hmm. What do you think a lot of us and a lot of people in general, and more specifically, a lot of therapists maybe don't really get about how integral interpersonal neurobiology is?
I think what's really popular these days are more like body-based therapies, like Hakomi or sensory motor or somatic experiencing. And I think that they are actually teaching interpersonal neurobiology principles. But IPNB, just so we don't, it's just not as well known. So I would say the main thing that it can teach therapists or lay people is like Dan Siegel created a definition of the mind. For example, like the mind is a process that regulates energy and information flow. So there's a way with the framework, we can use the language with pinpoint accuracy to like help our clients change and grow, rather than sometimes you can say like, become aware of your mind or meditate. But when you say that to your client as a therapist, the client may not know what you mean by the words.
Right. All right. So let's dial in here. So give me an example. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here of how you might work with a client, how you might integrate these principles and elements.
So the main thing over time that I've developed is something called kind voice, because I feel like the things that wire up the brain right are co-regulation, that's the relational nature of the brain, of the mind, and then being regulated inside. And, that's the internal nature of the mind. So kind voice is like an external technique manifestation of that. And what it is we look at what's happening, like the music ball, like the client's talking, and I'll take notes as they're talking. I'll be with them. They'll be talking for like 3 minutes, and then I'll have them pause, and then we'll do something called kind voice. And I'll say my kind, as long as they're okay with the word kind. Sometimes we can call it my balanced voice or my wise voice if they don't like the word kind. But that's a side comment. But I'll say, my kind voice says, it was really hard to get here. I almost got in a car accident. So I'll repeat back what I heard them say. And then they'll repeat back what I said. My kind voice says, it was really hard to get here, and she's proud of me for being here. And she sees that what I want to work on during this session is what happened to me when I was 5 years old. And we're about to start doing that in the next 2 minutes.
Okay.
So we start with that. It's just an example, one way we might start. So I'm with the client. I'm giving them whatever they want to get out of the session, but I'm getting them out of their left hemisphere, because sometimes when therapists talk, I call it the left hemisphere mafia. Sometimes it's like left hemisphere mafia to left hemisphere mafia, and I'm getting them to go into their right hemisphere a bit more with the pausing and the kind voice, and then we go back to whatever it is they want to work on. So that's just an example of how I work. And I can explain more how that relates to interpersonal neurobiology if you want. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is you're getting them out of the left brain.
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's one step removed. So if anyone's familiar with Ian McGilchrist's work about the two hemispheres, he has a book called The Master and His Emissary. And the right hemisphere is the master, and the emissary is the left hemisphere. And the idea with optimal brain health is you're in the right hemisphere, you go over to the left, and optimally you go back to the right for good brain health. Like when you're on a vacation, like when you're having the most incredible moment of your life, like you're not writing a postcard. So being in the left hemisphere is like writing postcards, but let me correct this a bit. A person's narrative, which is stories, which is what you're all about, is super important. And autobiographical memory is more in the right hemisphere. So it's not all just one thing or another. But what can happen as the client is talking to you is they get lost too much in the left hemisphere function. So you're just trying to integrate between the left and the right.
Wow. Okay. So you're doing this, and how do things evolve, generally speaking, for you? Yes, everyone's different and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But how are you working? How are things unfolding for you?
I think the main thing that starts to happen with clients is they learn how to dialogue internally in a different way, which I call electric fuel. Again, all the terms I use come from specific things that I can define. But electric fuel is, it's from compassion research. It's called a helpful safety strategy in shame research. But electric fuel is basically the wizard brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, calming you down. What happens with a lot of people is they are running on, I call it diesel fuel. Okay. And that's called a harmful safety strategy in the shame research. And what they're doing is they're criticizing themselves. And this is the thing that really changes things for my clients a lot. And when I teach is when people realize that they're criticizing themselves for a reason, that brain region is they're running on diesel fuel because it unconsciously calms them down. So when I'm working with people and I basically start to train their system that you're all like your left leg and the right leg, you're always going between diesel and electric fuel. You're always going between the left and the right hemisphere, but teaching them like, hey, electric fuel is another way to calm yourself down instead of diesel fuel is the general progression of what happens as I'm working with clients.
Wow. So in a way, you're kind of cultivating their awareness, helping them cultivate their awareness about what's going on, which is in and of itself very powerful. And how are you integrating this with somatic work, or are you? I'm assuming you are.
Yeah. I would say in a way, it's all somatic work. So if I'm in my left hemisphere, that is somatic. So I one of the things I am passionate about is educating. I feel like sometimes we put people in these boxes, but it's not. But so what I would say is what I'm doing is I'm helping people be more present, which is in their prefrontal cortex in their wizard brain, and I'm helping them be more in their right hemisphere where attachment longings come out of that. And I would say that would be what body-based therapists would say. I think what I just said about onboarding your wizard brain and being in your right hemisphere, I would say that's the same thing as asking a person to be aware of their body sensations. Mm-hmm. That's like the right hemisphere. I'm just using a neurobiology language instead of a body-based language.
When someone to even do this type of work, I'm assuming a certain nervous system regulation has to be present.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So I have something called 3 levels of kind voice. And there is something in self-compassion research called backdraft, which is like when you start introducing electric fuel, the part of your brain that's running on diesel fuel is like, no. Like we're not gonna run on electric fuel. So there are certain people who they can't manage what happens when you start to introduce self-compassion techniques.
Because why?
Yeah. Number one, I think it's literally threatening to the brain. The brain is like familiar. It's running on a certain fuel, and because the kindness is registering as a threat. Mm-hmm.
Because that in and of itself could be traumatic.
Exactly. And so so what you're doing with the person is I would kind voice it. My kind voice says, Heidi's telling me that there's this thing called kind voice that would make my brain wire up better, but it's not feeling safe right now. I'm not really sure I want to do the technique. So we would kind voice just whatever's happening in their awareness, and then we would stop. So a lot of what I'm doing is just slowing down, and having them being aware, and then check in and just like what's happening with the thinking system.
Wow. So that's really interesting. It reminded me of one of the sensory motor techniques where they talk about framing something. Can we frame this right now? And and correct me if I'm wrong here, but your utilization of the kind voice slows things down. It's stopping things in a sense, and it's giving the client and yourself in a sense the opportunity to kind of review what was just said.
Right. And I feel like this is so hard for therapists to do because you don't want to interrupt the client. You want them to understand that wherever they want to go, whatever they're sharing is very important. And so, and we talk about this in my brain health program, like how many times to do kind voice in a session. Right. And I think it depends on the client's motivation and understanding of what's going on. And certain people, I don't do it at all. But what I do is I do the equivalent of kind voice kind of in repeating back what's happening to them, but I don't have them do the technique. So for whatever reason, it doesn't work for them.
All right. I'm speaking with Heidi Crockett. We are going to talk about your brain health program. Let's get into it. So first of all, who's it for?
So I would say there's 3 people, mostly therapists who want to learn more about the brain and self-compassion, body-based therapists in particular who want to be able to articulate what they do from a neuroscience perspective. That's my audience. And also,
let me just interrupt. Yeah. That is I think that's a really crucial component of what you do. Yeah. And I think it's really useful for a lot of somatic therapists to have that. All right, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm giving a free webinar on February 5th on the neuroscience behind why body-based therapies are effective. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll have that linked up here at the show notes page
great.
at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. So, okay.
The other audience member that it's for, is that?
Yeah.
I'm tracking you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the other audience member are curious people who just want to be in a group, who want to learn, and they want to be in a kind group. So I have a retired therapist in my group. I'm trying to think of different examples. So it doesn't have to necessarily be therapists in the group. It's just people who are curious and who want to learn, because the group meets 12 times for 2 hours, and we do like a lot of interactive exercises. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's like a support group, but also like nerding out on all these neuroscience things,
which you love. You could tell it. You love it. You're so passionate about it. I love it. So, okay, what's this program called?
So I call it a professional certificate in brain health. And there's there's a fall semester, which is on the 9 skills of the wizard brain. It's on executive function. That's the fall program. And then the spring program, I call certificate in neural integration, neural like neuron, and it's on the 9 levels of integration. So there's a fall and a spring program. Okay. And when does each of those begin specifically? So it's coming up. It's on February 6th. The spring on the 9 levels. The 9 levels is the really interesting stuff. It's on attachment and memory and consciousness and the hemispheres. So I'm really excited about this. Wow. Yeah. So I'm curious about people who are listening to this, are therapists of all kinds, coaches specifically, not coaches specifically, but coaches also. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the type of stuff that I think is really useful for a lot of people. Talk more about what therapists might get out of this. So one of the things I'm passionate about is that there are ways that therapists are smart, they attune to their clients, they know how to do good work. And, there may be ways that if they have a little more neuroscience information, they could be more effective. Give me an example. Yeah. So here's an example. In somatic experiencing where I'm trained, oftentimes they'll have the person pause and they'll have the person go into their body. And that can be fine, but it doesn't always produce the results that I think they're taught, which is like where it causes the person to become more self-regulated and onboards their wizard brain. So like how, for example, I might in my program teach people how you could help a person pause and onboard their wizard brain who's in chronic pain, because you're not going to ask them how to go in the body. You're going to tell them, think of an image. You're going to get them in their right hemisphere and, tell me something. You're going to get them in their right hemisphere in a way different than having them feel their body. Because they might not even want to. They don't want to go in their body. Or be able to do that. Yeah. And I would say, in my opinion, the reason the body-based trauma processing modalities are effective is because they're helping slow down too much of that talk, and they're getting the person. So the opposite of the left hemisphere mafia, in my opinion, is like the prefrontal cortex and the right hemisphere. So I just kind of explained some neuroscience. So if people can know why what they're doing is effective, and then also when what they're doing might not totally be working, like knowing the neuroscience might help them tweak what they're already doing. Yeah, definitely. And be able to, I think, be more flexible and more creative and adaptable in the moment. Right. Which is crucial. When you say wizard brain, are you talking about, is that the prefrontal cortex? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I call it the wizard brain and the lizard brain. And the reason why is I feel like you don't need to know all the scientific language in order to get an understanding of these two different ways of thinking. Same thing with the left and the right hemisphere. But if you have a general understanding of it, then you can be more effective. So over time, I've just tried to tone down the technical language, but I am talking about, like in the glossary, when you do my program, I give you like a 111 page workbook and I define the terms, but I was like, let's just keep it simple. Let's just call it the lizard and the wizard.
What do you think is the state of education for therapists at this point?
I think that we have limitations with our left hemisphere dominant research models. So I don't know if it's necessarily anyone's fault. We have research behind EMDR. We have research behind CBD, cognitive behavior therapy. But I think some of the more body-based, there's just not a lot of money behind it. So I think a lot of and the differences between the hemispheres because of MRI imaging, that's not talked about often. So unfortunately, it's not what I'm talking about here during this podcast. It's not translated in the educational system for the most part. And I wish it were. I really do.
In terms of trauma and how that impacts the brain, where does that situate what you're doing? In other words, how are you working with someone, say, who has been traumatized?
So I would call trauma the moments that we haven't been resonated with. And sometimes we might think of it as like a memory capsule. And what you're doing, right, is you're trying to make the person resilient with that thing instead of it just being looping so much that their quality of life is like really awful. So again, you're just looking at the thinking and you're trying to get the person, right, to have a better quality of life so that thing doesn't just, kind of just interfere with their ability to. So when I'm working with people and their trauma, it has to do with the brain's negativity bias. Like, you probably heard people talk about that. It's just, people tend to remember the negative thing. Like if you had a really awesome experience for an hour, but something bad happened for the last 2 minutes, you're just going to remember the bad thing.
Right. Is there a difficulty in, cultivating an awareness between moving from the right and left hemispheres? And obviously there are different types of trauma, but let's say we're talking about interpersonal trauma.
Yeah. So, right. So there's shock trauma, which is a car accident. And sometimes we can do a few sessions, and I don't think that's stored as deeply. The problem with developmental or relational trauma, right, is you have 1,791 instances of car accidents. So it's just going to take more tinkering with the thinking to get the person out of this kind of the repetitive nature of this thing that you can't get it to shut up,
Right. Okay. All right, Heidi. We have your course coming up February 6th. How can people learn more about you and learn more about this program?
So my website is called centerforintegration.com, and you can just reach out to me at Heidi at centerforintegration.com, or you can message me on the contact form.
Okay. And we'll have all that linked up at the show notes page at thetraumatherapistpodcast.com. Heidi, intense. Love talking to you. I mean, obviously you're so passionate about this work.
Yeah. So
what keeps you passionate about this?
I think it's the satisfaction that clients get and like changes. And then also if I teach one therapist and then their whole client it's making a difference in people's lives. To me, that's where the passion is.
Awesome. Look, love to have you back at a later date. And excited to get this out there for you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Guy. It was great.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.